In the sterile quiet of a Baltimore laboratory, a century ago, a radical experiment unfolded, one that would scar the history of psychology. At the center of this ethical storm was not a complex machine, but a simple question. Can fear be manufactured? Can we take a blank slate, an innocent mind, and teach it what to dread? The subject was an infant, known to history only by a pseudonym, Little Albert. This is the story of the experiment that crossed the line, revealing the fragility of the human mind and the dark potential of behavioral science. To understand the experiment, we must understand the era. The year is 1920. Psychology was desperate for legitimacy, eager to move beyond the abstract introspection of Freud. Enter John B. Watson, charismatic, ambitious, and the father of a radical new idea, behaviorism.
Watson believed that all human behavior, everything we are, was simply a product of conditioning.
He argued that the mind was a black box. Only observable behavior mattered. It was a deterministic view, one that stripped away free will and emotion, reducing humanity to mechanism. By 1920, Watson needed a definitive demonstration. He wanted to prove that fear wasn't innate, but learned. He drew inspiration from Ivan Pavlov, who famously conditioned dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell. Watson, along with his graduate student Rosalie Rayner, planned to take Pavlov's concept into far darker territory. They wouldn't condition salivation. They would condition terror. The first challenge, finding a subject. They needed an infant who was emotionally stable, healthy, and, perhaps most crucially, accessible. They selected a 9-month-old boy, the son of a wet nurse working at the clinic. The mother's employment provided Watson with leverage. Informed consent was barely considered. Watson described the infant as stolid and unemotional, the perfect blank slate. The stage was set. The hypothesis was clear. The methodology, however, was brutal.
The experiment began with baseline testing. Albert was exposed to a series of stimuli for the first time.
A white rat, a rabbit, a dog, a monkey.
Even masks and burning newspapers.
The results. Albert showed no fear. He was curious, reaching out to touch the animals. Watson had confirmed his baseline. The fear was not innate. 2 months later, the conditioning trials began. The objective, to pair the neutral stimulus, the white rat,
with an unconditioned stimulus that naturally elicited fear. A loud, sudden noise.
As Albert reached for the rat, Watson unleashed a terrifying sound. The sound was terrifying. Albert reacted instantly. Watson noted. The infant jumped violently and fell forward, burying his face in the mattress. It was not a gentle introduction to fear. It was an assault on the senses. A week later, they repeated the process. The rat was presented. Albert hesitated. He was wary. But as he reached out, the hammer fell again. Over the course of several sessions, the association was relentlessly reinforced.
The psychological toll was evident. The once stolid child was now anxious and distressed.
Finally, the critical test. The rat was presented alone. No loud noise. The reaction was immediate and profound. He began to cry, attempting to crawl away as fast as he could. The conditioning was successful. Watson had taught the boy to fear the white rat.
In that sterile room, a fundamental, yet terrifying, truth about human nature was revealed.
Fear could be implanted, molded like clay. But the experiment wasn't over. The implications were about to spread. Watson and Rayner now tested for stimulus generalization. Would the fear transfer to objects similar to the white rat? The results were staggering. Albert now feared the rabbit. The dog. A fur coat. Even a ball of cotton wool.
In perhaps the most disturbing test, Watson appeared wearing a Santa Claus mask with a white cotton beard.
The infant was terrified. The fear had metastasized. It was no longer about a single animal. It was about the color white, the texture of fur. The world, for this child, had become a minefield of triggers.
Watson had proven his theory in the most dramatic way possible. He declared this demonstrated how phobias are formed.
He famously boasted that given a dozen healthy infants, he could turn them into anything: doctor, lawyer, artist, or even a thief.
The academic world took notice. Behaviorism had its foundational proof.
But while the science celebrated, the subject, little Albert, was left behind, burdened with manufactured fears.
Perhaps the most damning aspect of the experiment was the aftermath.
Watson and Rayner had intended to recondition Albert, to systematically remove the fears they had implanted. But they never did. Albert left the hospital with his mother before the process could begin. A child was sent out into the world with a newly created phobia, and no one intervened. Watson himself was soon forced out of Johns Hopkins, not due to the ethics of the experiment, but because of a public scandal involving his affair with Rosalie Rayner. He went on to a lucrative career in advertising, applying the principles of behaviorism, fear, desire, association, to sell products. But the mystery of little Albert remained. Who was he? And what became of him? Recent investigations suggest Albert was likely Douglas Merritt. The discovery was tragic. Merritt died young from hydrocephalus.
If true, it raises further questions about whether Watson concealed the infant's health status, potentially selecting a vulnerable child and undermining his own results.
Regardless of Albert's true identity, the experiment left an indelible mark on psychology. It highlighted the terrifying ease with which the human mind can be conditioned, providing a foundation for our understanding of phobias. But its true legacy is the ethical reckoning it forced upon the field. The profound ethical failures of the experiment catalyzed the development of strict guidelines for human research. Informed consent, protection from harm, the right to withdraw.
These are the barriers erected because of what happened in that white room.
John B. Watson sought to control human behavior, but his methods revealed a profound lack of humanity. The little Albert experiment remains a cautionary tale, a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge without compassion is merely intellectual vanity. We are all products of conditioning. Our environments shape us, mold our desires and our fears. But as we navigate a world saturated with stimuli, the real question isn't just how we learn to fear, but how we learn to overcome it.